So now we are jumping from Sweden to the Central European University, in particular to the Open Learning Initiative, OLIV. Ian Cook will talk about this, but first, please let me introduce Ian Cook. He is the Director of Studies at the OLIV Initiative in Budapest and Head of OLIV at Central European University. An anthropologist by training, his work focuses on urban India, environmental justice, access to higher education, and podcasting. And he strives to make scholarly practice more collaborative and multimodal. And he is part of the Allegra Lab editorial collective. Yes, these few words from your side, Ian. Thank you very much, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I have a slideshow. Maybe I use it, maybe not, because I think my slides aren't very beautiful. They're just words. But maybe because my accent sometimes is difficult, I should have a presentation. So yeah, as Kati mentioned, and thank you for Kati and Susanna for the invitation. I'm going to be talking about OLIV, which is the Open Learning Initiative. This was begun in 2016 at the Central European University, which at that time was only based in Budapest in Hungary. There'd been a talk for quite some time amongst people in and around the university, staff and students, about what the university could do in terms of education for displaced people in Hungary. This sort of built on an access program, which has been active at the university for now probably around 15 years, which was the Roma Graduate Preparatory Program, or previously called the Roma Access Program. And this was a program which was running at the university to help provide educational opportunities for people from the Roma community, which is some of the most marginalized ethnic groups in Central and Eastern Europe, if not all of Hungary. And this, like I said, this has been running for a while. And a lot of people who were involved in that program, when we started to have more and more displaced people in Hungary, thought, what can we do as a university? So then in 2016, the first OLIV was set up, and this began as a very informal ad hoc thing taking place on Saturdays. I'm sure we all remember 2015, 2016, the situation at the time. I don't like to use the word refugee crisis. I think it was a crisis of European, different European states, but especially it was played, as you might remember, as a political game by the Hungarian state very well at the time. Very well, I mean, like for their own purposes. The Hungarian government decided to hold tens of thousands of people in Hungary and not allow them to move any further, even though they were being told by states further to the west that they would be welcome. And there was a sort of a crisis situation, especially around the Keleti train station. And so a lot of people who were involved in that as well were from grassroots organizations, specifically one called MIG-Help, MIG-Sol, which is Migrant Solidarity, which was a migrant-led solidarity group. And people from that organization then pushed people at the university, said, hey, come on, what are you going to do about this? How are you as a university going to help? And I mention that because I think it's an interesting way that something came about, not only as a sort of initiative from the university, but because people who were working and studying at the university had links to people outside of the university, and that together this was formed. I should say a few words then also about the Central European University. It's an American private university which was set up in 1991 with funding from George Soros, the bogeyman of the right across the world. And it was set up in part to offer English language, international standard education to people from in the sort of post-socialist space, but it's changed quite a bit since then. Now the university, even though I'm sitting in Budapest now, I'm sitting in a 90% empty building because most of the university has now relocated to Vienna. because legislation was passed by the Hungarian state, which stopped us being able to give degree programs a few years ago. And so now most of the activities take place there. And so Olive, the weekend program, which I'll talk a bit more about, still exists here, but the university preparatory program, which I'll also mention a little bit, relocated first to Berlin and then to Vienna due to this complicated legal situation. And I just have to say one more thing about the law, unfortunately, because we are in Hungary. The Hungarian government passed legislation in 2019 called the Migratory Assistance legislation. And this said that any organization or group who was involved in helping the long-term stay of migrants in Hungary was liable to an extra 25% tax on their activities. And they specifically listed educational programs within that. So basically, anyone who, and this tax, this extra 25% tax, was said to be used to fund the border patrols on the southern and eastern borders of Hungary and to build this fence that they built there. In response to this, the university where I worked, Central European University, shut down our program because they were worried about this. And I have views on that, but I won't go into them. And they set us up in a separate private company, which was associated with the university, but not part of the university. So in case any tax had to be paid, it wouldn't be levied on the whole of the university, but just this separate legal entity. However, not a single penny, or should I say forint, of tax has ever been collected. It was done, as often is the case by the Hungarian government, to threaten initiatives, but actually most people have managed to carry on. So yeah, that's the sort of big situation where we are. And I should also say that in Hungary, up until the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there was around 5,000 displaced people, or 5,000 people with refugee status or who are asylum seeking in Hungary. So it's probably much less than what we'd find in Germany or Sweden, but at the same time, it is a much smaller country and it has much less developed infrastructure for helping people who are who've been displaced. Now, obviously, with the current situation, there's a lot more people here because we're a bordering country to Ukraine, even though most people would prefer to go to a Slavic-speaking country or further to the west than remaining in Hungary. Okay, so that all being said, context-wise, I'm going to talk then a little bit about Olive. So what is Olive? Why isn't my computer working? What is Olive? So Olive, Open Learning Initiative. So we don't only exist at CU, we exist in many places, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the educational spaces more broadly, yeah, for people who've experienced displacement. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. And we have full-time programs, we have part-time programs, we have programs for students who already have some form of formal education. And sometimes we also take people in our programs who have little to no education, maybe just sort of primary level education, but it all takes place inside a university. And yeah, I think this is important for reasons I can come to later. So it's a place of teaching and learning, but also solidarity, activism, and advocacy as well. And it's very important that we think about how we make these spaces open and welcoming, even though they're inside a university, which can be quite intimidating spaces for many people. Yeah, so they were set up, as I said, by a group of people, half in, half out of the university. We think that education, this is I guess one of the reasons we exist. It should be inclusive and not exclusive. I was at a workshop with Kati a couple of weeks ago, and there were some people there talking about how universities maybe have to necessarily be exclusive places. I'm not sure I completely agree. I think universities sort of facing a bit of a crisis for their existence in Europe, like what's basically their purpose. And I think universities can probably repurpose themselves a little bit as actors for social good in the world. Especially because very often states fail to do their duty. It was interesting, listen to Katerina's talk earlier, which was talking about all the work done by TU Berlin and like wonderful work. And universities are often stepping into the space to do the work, where I also think sometimes the state itself should actually be taking a more proactive role. Universities can bring a lot of expertise, but often it's we have to deal with state bureaucracies as we go through. So yeah, there have been olives in different places. There's one in the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, or it was there, but they have sort of funding issues. Bard College Berlin, which is a small private university in Berlin. Central European University, which is now in Austria, which is where I sort of work. And then Open Education, which is this private company, which is affiliated with the university where I'm sitting right now, and also the University of East London in the UK and the University of Vienna in Austria. So it's gone into a few different places. It started in Budapest, and we've worked with people in different ways. So the thing I'm not going to talk very much about, because it just stopped this year, unfortunately, but although it relates much more to the overall topic of this series, is the university preparatory program, what we call Olive Up. And this, when it exists again, which I hope it will when we get better funding, it's a full-time, fully funded university prep program. And we managed to take people in from anywhere anyone inside anywhere. If they're based anywhere within inside the European Economic Area, they can apply for the program. So it's not only for people in Hungary or for people in Austria. And then we brought them first to Budapest and then to Vienna, and then have sort of a 10-month-long program specifically for people to get into master's degree programs. The reason why this is the case is because our university, up until very recently, did not have an undergraduate program. It only had a master's program. And we knew that for a while we would be able to get funding for those students if they got accepted on merit. It's very important our students only get accepted on merit, but if our students go through the program, get accepted to a master's program at the university on merit, then we could get funding to fund their basically accommodation costs and living costs for the 1 year or 2 years of the master's program. It's relatively small. We can take 8 to 12 students a year, but 80% of the students who do Olive Up manage to get into a fully funded master's program afterwards. It is sort of interesting. We have got students who've gone elsewhere as well. Some students have gone to the UK, some students have gone to the Netherlands as well. In terms of like thinking about master's education, it can be very attractive for certain groups of students if they already have a BA from back home, or if they have an almost completed BA, we can still accept them into the program. And that's because we managed to change the university policy on recognition of prior credentials, specifically for students in a refugee-like situation. I can share that if you like, and you can put up on the Moodle, but basically this is because we're in a private American university, so we don't have to play by the rules of the local of governments to a certain degree. Of course we do to a certain degree. So it meant we could recognize that sometimes people have incomplete education, but we don't want people to go back again to start at the beginning. A lot of students also told us that they were attracted for a master's program because even if they had an undergraduate degree from where they were coming from, these degrees were not taken particularly, they were not held in such high regard in Europe, basically. So there was basically, you know, they might have a degree in whatever discipline from Syria or Afghanistan, but when they were applying for jobs or when they were applying for master's programs inside Europe, they were not taken particularly seriously. So to get a European degree allowed them then to move on, and they didn't want to do 3 years or 4 years of undergraduate, but a 1-year master's program, which is, of course, is understandable. As I said before, it's not running this year, unfortunately. University is in a big mess, but we hope it will get up and running again in the future. So I'll talk a little bit then about the Olive Weekend program, which was the original starting program. And this is only for people who are based in Hungary because we are not a university. We're just this private place, so we can't take people on student visas from elsewhere. But yeah, this takes place every Saturday for over a full academic year, and it's not an accredited program. I mean, we give certificates, but it's not, you know, a recognized accredited program. And we have a very diverse group of students. We take around 50 a year. I mentioned the diversity. I don't mean diversity only in terms of where people are from, but diversity in terms of people's prior education, diversity in terms of their goals and aims, like reasons why they want to come to the program, age as well, academic skill set, we can say, or ability, and language ability as well. So it's quite a big mix, but we try to keep it very open. I'll come back to this a little bit later when I talk about the goals and the aims of the program. But it's worth pointing out two things. Firstly, a lot of people come because there's not much other stuff in Hungary going on for displaced people. So even if they might not usually think about going to university, they come for like skill, language, community, place where they feel a bit safe. Hungarian state's engaged in, you know, a 5-year-long, extremely racist propaganda campaign against displaced people, and also has put in place specific barriers to stop people with a refugee status from getting funding that would be available to them if they were an international student, for example. So it's difficult. At the same time, we're always at the margins of the university and fighting actually with the university administration all the time to have our students properly accepted as proper students inside the university. This university is quite, at least has pretensions of being an elite place, and for that reason, there's certain members of the administration that don't like to see the sorts of students who come to the weekend program inside the university, and this is a constant struggle, but I think worth mentioning as well, because we should be honest about how difficult it is when you try to open up the university. So what do we want to do? We want to like widen access to university education. So some of the people who come into our program, they come over multiple years, and at the end of that, then they've managed to make successful applications to full-time higher education initiatives, which is great that they can get in, but it's not something which can be done very quickly. And sometimes, oh, I've gone one ahead, I'm sorry. Also, like to discuss more widely this sort of conversation. I mean, we don't like to use the word integration very often. We prefer to use the word inclusion when we think about displaced people in education. Integration suggests that people who've experienced displacement should learn how to learn, or learn how to be in a education setting like locals, should we say? Rather, we think it's universities or programs like ours can be a good place for helping develop and foster critical thinking skills so that people can set the terms of their own inclusion. And I think enough said on that. And then outcomes. And so what do we hope that people who come to the weekend program can do? Like how can they develop? We hope they develop their critical thinking skills, but also at the same time as we offer like practical knowledge in certain areas that we hope can lead to better employment. But I think one of the big things, the sort of soft skills that's often not talked about from these programs, and I'm sure like the two earlier presentations had, you know, could find similar places in bridging or like prep programs. A lot of it's about confidence, communication skills, and so on. Like especially if students are entering a European university for a first time, it can be quite an intimidating place, quite a place, you know, of exclusion. And so it's also good to build up these confidence skills over time, but it also takes time. Yeah, also to help people apply to different universities, very similar to the work that Katerina was talking about as well, giving students advice, helping them find different ways. And often it is hyper individualized because of the specific nature of people's prior qualifications and what they need to do. Sometimes we have students come to us who are enrolled in high school. This is an increasing thing that we're working with. Mostly these are students who came in sort of 2015, 2016 as either unaccompanied minors or with their families, and they've been enrolled into Hungarian schools since then. So they speak pretty decent Hungarian, but they have these massive gaps in their past education, and especially for the young women, they don't want to leave Hungary, or Budapest to study even in another city, but they would like to go to a Budapest-based university or college, and but for that they need to get the best possible school leaving exams, and very often their parents are not fully equipped to advise them on the best way to manage the Hungarian school system, and at the same time, sometimes they were placed into not always the best schools, and so they really struggled to get a decent quality education in their final years of schooling. So we help them get decent exam results, or at least we hope we get them. At least we hope to help them get decent exam results, so as to widen as much as possible their opportunities. But as I mentioned, there's a wide sort of range of people who come to the weekend program. So some are really focused on getting on a certain educational path, but others simply come because they want to learn stuff, which is also like a really great thing. Like it's not necessarily, you know, an instrumental way of using education, which is totally fine, by the way, like wanting a qualification, but sometimes they're working in rather low skilled, not particularly interesting jobs, which they didn't used to do when they were back home. So they come to the weekend program to learn about different subjects, to get involved in things, to get involved in creative programs as well. And I think this is a really important as well. I mean, now I'm teaching an urban anthropology course. I'm an urban anthropologist, and it's just great to have people who are never going to be urban anthropologists or social scientists wanting to get involved and learn more about urban theory and get involved in doing small research projects as well. And I think it also reminds us very often as teachers how great it is to be involved, how great it is to do teaching when people actually come to learn because they want to learn, not for a secondary reason as well. So that's lots of fun. Just to give you an idea of what we do, like on a Saturday, so usually we start with English classes, is split into 4 different groups, and then after that students can pick different classes throughout the day. So some of them are more creative, we say, like art and animation or community theatre. Some are more academic, like the anthropology course I mentioned, Stories of Our City, or business management, which is more of an academic course. Some of them are more skills based, so like career development or digital literacy. So these different types of courses exist depending upon, and so students can then choose how to navigate this. It's only every Saturday, and so it's over the whole academic year we can manage 24 classes. So it's probably about as in depth as a year-long course outside of in a normal university program. However, most of our students are either in full-time education or like at school, like the younger ones, or they're in full-time work. So it's not as intense, even though there's 3 classes a week, as like a undergraduate or master's level program. Problem that we have right now is that a lot of our students, if we want to thinking about access to education, is apart from those students who came as children and so were forced to learn Hungarian by being dropped into a Hungarian high school, is that if you want to apply for a university program in Hungary, it's basically free if you get accepted into a Hungarian language program, but you have to pay for an English language program. There is funding available for international students to apply for scholarships to come and attend these programs called like a Hungarian scholarship scheme. However, people who are refugees are explicitly excluded from that program by the Hungarian state. So our students are left in a little bit of a bind there. And so that's like a bit of a challenge, which is partly why I was asking Katerina about the possibility for non-Berlin residents to apply, because now we're trying to look into how to help our students get into universities like in the surrounding countries, and conversation with different universities like in Romania and Slovakia, because there it's still possible for students to live relatively cheap. What if they get accepted into a program without a scholarship, to find some sort of way of working or so on. But basically a low mobility possibilities, I think, for a lot of students who are in Hungary because of the problems with the Hungarian state, but also then how to move elsewhere. Basically, unless you manage the 7 to 9 years you need to become a citizen of Hungary and pass all the tests, then you have the mobility of an EU citizen to apply to different universities. But by the time people get to that stage, very often their lives have changed in such a way they don't want to go back into full-time education. And in the past, CEU was a good option for many of these students, but because of the changes at the university engendered partly through the move to Vienna, it's becoming less and less viable. Basically, the university is slowly bankrupting itself by moving from Budapest to Vienna and turning into something different from what it used to be. That's all I wanted to say about olives. I tried to speak fast because I realized I didn't have the full time, but I think I spoke too fast because I finished 5 minutes earlier than planned. But maybe that's good because then maybe there's time for questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian. Yes, we have this 5 minutes until 11, and we have 10 more minutes because we want to have this closure of the webinar with Manuel Sierra, and he can attend this webinar at 11:10 more or less. So we have around 40 minutes for discussing, because I think there are a lot of things regarding some topics, for example, the recognition of soft skills or this not certified or documented knowledge. And one thing, I don't know if there are questions from participants, but if not, I would like to ask all the speakers about the sustainability of the actions. Are they sustainable in time and with the resources you have right now? Ian says no.
I would say it's like a clear problem that we have is that we all know how funding works inside Europe now. It's all project based, a lot of it, right? And so you write projects, you get funding for 3 years or 2 years or 5 years or whatever. 5 years would be a dream, but then the thing is, often what a lot of people are running are not projects but programs, and nobody wants to fund programs. People want to fund projects, and projects are really problematic because they have a start date, they have an end date, they have a whatever. But we know that education is not something which just gets, goes from A to B, rather it's a longer term thing. These sorts of things need to, I think, be funded by states and universities themselves as core activities, so that you don't have to spend so much time searching for funding all the time. We're not very expensive. Like, we run a whole program for 50 students for less than the cost of a senior administrator at the university. But still, we have to struggle for money all the time. So, and a lot of people, I think, were thinking very problematically that, the refugee education problem had been solved because, after 2015-16, if there's far less people coming in, let's not think about it anymore. The Russian invasion of Ukraine changed this for many people, but I think it's also highly problematic because we had a lot of children come to Europe in 2015, 2016, going through high school, and these are the sort of people I think with which programs can really work very well to help them to really succeed in higher education, but they would really need that extra sort of help along the way as well. So yeah, sustainability is a massive issue.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. And Katarina and Kaisa, what do you think about the sustainability of the actions you have been developing?
Well, on the one hand, I agree, of course, to what Ian just mentioned. So, of course, we also have the funding issues, and yeah, many of the activities related to bringing refugees into higher education are like project-based funded. But this is also the reason why we tried from the very beginning to do things which we can do within our regular work. So it's nothing really, so we don't need that much extra funding, but of course we need staff. So, and that's an issue all the time, of course. But I think like what we do basically is sustainable in the sense that it's really related to our regular work, to also what we do. And it's not so much depending on how many refugees there are coming or how much we talk about refugees, because I also agree to it seemed that the refugee issue was gone, but it never was. So even people from 2015 are still there, and they still need advice and they still need guidance. And so it was never gone, and it will not vanish, even though people might want it to go away. I think it's just our standard work that we deal with people coming from all kinds of different backgrounds. So on the one hand, yes, we do have the same funding issues. On the other hand, as I said, we try to do things not project-like, but to integrate it into our regular work. So it's not that if the funding finishes, it's not that everything is gone. So, yeah.
Thank you, Catarina. We have a question for Ian from Laura Vega. She asks, well, this is a really valuable project, and she asked, which type of funding did you apply for the project? Maybe KA2 Erasmus Plus?
We got Erasmus Plus funding twice. We also got funded by the Open Society University Network, which is Open Society Foundation money. And we also currently funded by the James MacArthur Foundation, which is a private American foundation, which is an interesting story and speaks maybe to Abdallah's question before about the differential understanding of Ukrainian and non-Ukrainian displaced people in Europe. They got in touch with us and said, we want to fund education programs for Ukrainian refugees in Hungary. And we had a call with them and we said, that's really, really great, but don't you just want to fund all of our activities, because it doesn't make sense for to target particular groups. And the person we spoke to, the project officer, was totally understanding and said, yeah, that makes total sense. And they funded the whole program, not just specifically. But again, that's just for 1 year. And yeah, so we don't have any funding from next summer. So we'll find out if we still exist or not.
Well, fingers crossed. Now we have here Manuel Sierra. Thank you very much for joining us, Manuel.
So thank you very much to all of you. So I am the responsible of this project at the UPN, and for finishing the project, I want to thank for sure all the attendees and all the speakers that today we had this very interesting session. But in this last day, I want to thank especially to two people, Katy Jerez and Susana Guerrero, because they organized this 3 days course in a brilliant way. So thank you, and for sure we will contact you again for the future activities of this InQuestream project. This project is the project we had been including these courses is a Erasmus Plus project between Technical University of Berlin, KTH in Stockholm, and UPN in Madrid. And I think that's all. That is 3 minutes after the deadline. So thanks a lot, and see you in the next course or activity of meeting or whatever. Thanks to all.
Thank you very much, Manuel. And thank you to all the speakers and participants. You can recover or download all the information in the Moodle. I think that we have a lot of food for thought. I have more questions than ever, and I think it's very interesting. And maybe we can contact each other, because I think that there are a lot of things to do. And as we have been repeating during today, it's not about this humanitarian crisis and this permanent crisis of the European Union towards human rights. It's something that will. It's here for forever, the forced movement of people. And as universities, we need to be a social actor and to respond to this crisis. So thank you very much. This is not a goodbye. It's a see you later. Thank you, Susana. I don't know if you want to say some words.
Thank you for all. Thank you, Katy, for this excellent webinar. I really learned a lot of you. And thank you for all.
Okay, so see you virtually, or let's see face to face. Thank you, and
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.